What happens to an army when the man who sent them to die simply vanishes? Imagine standing in the mud, surrounded by enemy fire, waiting for orders that never come, only to find out the leader who put you there is gone. This is not a story about politics or maps. This is a story about 130. 0 human beings trapped inside a net they cannot see, lit by a command structure that has suddenly gone silent. The tension in the air is thick enough to cut with a knife, because the news reports are only showing you half the picture. They show you the lines on the map. They show you the villages that changed hands. But they do not show you the silence that has fallen over the Russian command structure. 3 days ago, a specific general, the architect of this entire operation, was removed from his post. He was not killed in action. He was not wounded in battle. He was simply erased. There was no press conference. There was no official statement released to the public. There was no explanation given to the soldiers on the ground who are now fighting for their lives. He just disappeared from the chain of command. And while he vanished into the bureaucracy, 130 Tsaro troops remained exactly where he put them. They are in a position that has been sealed off. They are cut off from their main supply lines. They are being methodically reduced by forces that planned this outcome weeks ago. When a leader of this magnitude disappears during an active crisis, it sends a signal louder than any artillery barrage. It tells everyone watching, from the lowest private to the highest political official, that the situation is no longer being managed. It is being contained. There is a massive difference between managing a battle and containing a disaster. Managing means you have a plan to win. Containing means you are trying to limit how bad the loss will look. The removal of this general suggests that the higher command has decided this operation is unrecoverable. They are not trying to fix the trap. They are trying to fix the blame. They need a name to attach to this failure so the institution itself remains clean. But while they shuffle papers in Moscow, the men in the field are facing a reality that is becoming darker by the hour. This encirclement did not happen by accident. It was not a lucky break for the opposing forces. It was the result of a campaign designed over 6 weeks to produce exactly this result. The goal was not just to push the line back. The goal was to create a pocket so large and so deep that escape would be impossible. The plan relied on 3 distinct stages, each one setting the stage for the next. The first stage was about breaking the support system before the fight even began. 4 weeks. Long Midas range strikes targeted the nodes behind the front lines. These were not the trenches where the soldiers were sleeping. These were the ammunition transfer points, the fuel depots, the communication hubs that allowed commanders to talk to each other. By degrading this infrastructure early, the attacking force ensured that when the ground assault finally started, the defenders would be fighting blind and hungry, cut off from the resources that make a coherent defense possible. It is a classic strategy, but the precision used here was new. The ability to identify specific targets and destroy them in a specific sequence without alerting the enemy required incredible reconnaissance and intelligence. The Russian command did not realize what was happening until the support system was already crumbling. They thought they were facing random strikes. They did not see the pattern. They did not see that their ability to sustain a large force was being removed piece by piece. This is the kind of preparation that wins wars before the first shot is fired on the ground. It creates a hollow force that looks strong on paper but collapses under pressure. The second stage was about deception. While the support infrastructure was being degraded, a massive effort was made to mislead Russian intelligence. Forces were positioned to suggest an attack was coming from the east. False logistics trails were created. Fake radio chatter was broadcast to mimic the movement of large armored divisions. The goal was to make the Russian command look in the wrong direction. That it worked. The generals reinforced the eastern axis. They moved their reserves to where they thought the danger was. They strengthened positions that were not under threat. This left the northern sector thinner than it should have been. It left the critical logistics corridor vulnerable. When the real assault began, it did not come from where the intelligence reports said it would. It came from the north, against positions that had been weakened by the very decisions made to protect them. The general in command reinforced the wrong spots because he was reading a map that had been drawn for him by the enemy. The third stage was closure of the trap. 2 axes of advance moved simultaneously. One came from the northwest. One came from the northeast. They moved fast. They did not stop to fight every pocket of resistance. Their only goal was the corridor. They wanted to meet in the middle. They wanted to cut the line that connected the front Midas line troops to the rear. It took them less than 40-8 hours to converge. When they met, the door was shut. 130,000 soldiers were on the wrong side of the line. They were inside the pocket. The logistics corridor was severed. Now imagine being one of those soldiers. You are far from home. You are in hostile territory. Your radio crackles with static. Your supplies are running low. And then you hear the rumor. You hear that the man who ordered you here is no longer in charge. You do not know who is in charge now. You do not know if anyone is coming to get you. That uncertainty is a weapon all on its own. It corrodes morale faster than any bullet. This brings us to the heart of the mystery. Why did the general disappear? He was not an incompetent officer. By all accounts, he was one of the most capable commanders in the structure. He had led successful operations in other sectors earlier in the conflict. His tactical competence was acknowledged even by those who opposed him. This makes his removal even more significant. If he was a bad general, his removal would be a simple correction. But he was a good general given an impossible mission. He was asked to hold a line with resources that were insufficient against an adversary that was better prepared. When the outcome became inevitable, the institution needed a scapegoat. They needed a single name to bear the weight of the failure. By removing him, they create a narrative that says the problem was the man, not the plan. They avoid having to admit that the strategy itself was flawed. They avoid having to admit that the resources were not there. This is a common tactic in large military institutions. When an operation fails catastrophically, the leadership often sacrifices the commander to protect the system. It allows the higher command to say that everything would have been fine if not for this one individual. But the soldiers know the truth. They know that no single general could have fixed the lack of ammunition. They know that no single general could have stopped the drones that were hunting their supplied works. They know that the trap was built over weeks, not days. So when he disappears, it does not give them hope. It gives them confirmation. It confirms that the high command has written them off. It confirms that the priority is now political survival, not military rescue. The general knew this too. He understood that his presence had become politically costly. His removal was not about improving the situation for the troops. It was about managing the fallout for the leadership. The human cost of this decision is immense. Inside the encirclement, the mood has shifted. Soldiers talk to each other. Information moves through the ranks faster than any official broadcast. They know the command has changed. They know the communication patterns have shifted. They feel the disruption in the institutional continuity that usually tells them someone is looking out for them. Now that feeling is gone. They are left wondering if the institution is still fighting for them, or if it has already made peace with losing them. This is the most corrosive form of institutional failure. It is not just about lacking supplies. It is about lacking belief. When soldiers believe their leadership has abandoned them, the will to fight evaporates. They start conserving ammunition not for the next battle, but for the end. They start looking for ways out that do not involve following orders. The bond between the unit and the command is broken. Current indicators suggest that no major relief operation is coming. The reserve forces that would be needed to break through the defensive cordon are not moving into position. The logistics required to sustain a relief force are not being forward deployed. The command and control architecture needed to coordinate a complex rescue is not being established. Instead, what we are seeing is defensive positioning. Preparations to manage the aftermath rather than prevent the outcome. This mirrors previous instances in this conflict where encirclement tests were deemed unrecoverable. In those cases, the command did not try to rescue the trapped units. They tried to manage the attrition. They tried to slow down the loss rather than stop it. The behavior of the logistics systems tells the real story. If the assessment was different, the trucks would be moving, the reserves would be mobilizing. But the silence from the rear tells the soldiers everything they need to know. The general who disappeared knew this assessment. The soldiers inside know it too. They read it in the empty supply crates and the quiet radios. Now we must consider who has been put in charge. When a general vanishes 3 days into a crisis of this magnitude, the replacement is not just a formality. It is the factor that determines how the next phase unfolds. The officer who has been placed in command of this sector does not have the same background. His previous experience lies in logistics management and administrative functions. He has not commanded large combat formations in active encirclement situations. This is not a judgment on his personal ability. It is an observation about the fit between the leader and the crisis. Managing 130. Zaro-trapped soldiers requires a specific kind of experience. It requires the ability to make hard choices under extreme pressure. The ability to coordinate internal defenses while communicating accurately with the outside. It requires the ability to decide whether to hold for relief or attempt to break out. The officer now holding that command does not have a track record of making those specific calls. He is learning the scope of the disaster while he is trying to manage it. The 130. Zaro soldiers he is now responsible for will feel the consequences of this learning curve. There is no time for minus job training when you are surrounded. Decisions must be made in minutes, not days. A lack of specific experience leads to hesitation. Hesitation leads to missed opportunities. in an encirclement. A missed opportunity can mean the difference between a managed breakout and total destruction. The disappearance of the previous general was an institutional failure, but the replacement choice turns that failure into an operational consequence. It degrades the quality of decision-making available to the trap force at the moment when decision-making matters most. It signals that the institution is not prioritizing the survival of the pocket. It is prioritizing the administrative continuity of the command structure. 130,000 trapped soldiers is not just a tactical problem. It is a strategic earthquake. An army that has this many soldiers caught in a pocket is an army that has lost a significant fraction of its operational capacity. These soldiers are not advancing. They are not reinforcing other sectors. They are not available as reserves for the other crises developing across the front. They are consuming attention. They are consuming resources. They are consuming decision-making capacity that the command cannot afford to divert. Every hour spent managing this encirclement is an hour not spent on other parts of the line. Every truck sent to try to supply the pocket is a truck not sent to where the next attack might come. The strategic multiplier of an encirclement is the way it removes a large formation from the balance sheet at precisely the moment when that formation is needed elsewhere. This creates cascading vulnerabilities. If the northern sector is locked down, the adjacent sectors become weaker. The enemy knows this. They will press where the reserves are not. They will exploit the gaps left by the trap force. The northern encirclement is not a problem contained to one map grid. It is a problem that reverberates across every sector where the command would have used these soldiers if they were free. The removal of the general who produced this situation sends a signal to every other commander in the army. It tells them what the institution believes about the trajectory of the conflict. It tells them that when things go wrong, the individual pays the price, not the plan. This has created a culture of risk aversion. Commanders will stop making bold moves. They will stop trying to seize opportunities. They will focus on protecting their own positions rather than winning the war. This message is not broadcast on television. It is transmitted through behavior. In military institutions, behavior is always more honest than communication. The soldiers know this. The officers know this. The general who disappeared knew this better than anyone. He understood that his removal was a message to the rest of the corps. It was a warning. But warnings do not fill ammunition boxes. They do not fix broken radio networks. They do not stop the artillery shells from falling. The reality on the ground is governed by physics and logistics, not by political signaling. The trap is physical. The lack of supplies is physical. The enemy pressure is physical. No amount of administrative reshuffling changes the fact that 130 Zyromen are in a hole with no ladder. The strategic impact will be felt for months. It will limit what the army can do in the next season. It will limit what the army can do in the next year. When a disaster of this scale happens, the ripple effects reach far beyond the battlefield. It affects the morale of the nation. It affects the confidence of the allies. It affects the calculations of the adversaries. They see that a large force can be isolated and neutralized. They see that the command structure is fragile. They see that the leadership is willing to sacrifice commanders to save face. This encourages the enemy to push harder. It encourages them to look for the next trap. It encourages them to believe that the system is vulnerable. The disappearance of the general is an admission of weakness. It is an admission that the plan failed. It is an admission that the situation is dire. You do not remove a commander quietly unless you are trying to hide the scale of the problem. If the situation was under control, you would keep the commander in place to fix it. You would announce a change of strategy. You would announce a reinforcement. Silence is the loudest admission of all. The families of the soldiers are also part of this story. They are waiting for news. They are watching the reports. They are hearing rumors about the general. They are wondering if their sons and husbands are being abandoned. The uncertainty at home is just as painful as the uncertainty in the trench. When the command structure breaks down, the connection to the families breaks down too. Letters do not get sent. Calls do not get made. The official channels go quiet. This creates a secondary crisis of trust between the military and the society it serves. If the people believe the military is hiding the truth about losses, the support for the conflict erodes. It starts with whispers. It grows into questions. Eventually, it becomes a demand for answers. The institution may think it is protecting itself by removing the general and staying silent, but in the long run, the secrecy damages the legitimacy of the entire effort. You cannot fight a modern war without the trust of your people. Is it possible for the trap force to get out on their own? It is theoretically possible, but it is incredibly difficult. A breakout requires coordination. It requires concentration of force at a specific point. It requires sacrificing some units to hold the line while others move. It requires fuel and ammunition for the push. If the supplies are already low, The breakout will stall. If the command is confused, the timing will be off. If the enemy knows where you are going, they will be waiting. The Ukrainian forces have had weeks to prepare the walls of this pocket. They have mined the routes. They have positioned harnessed tank teams. They have artillery pre-minus registered on the likely exit points. For the trap force to break out, they would need to achieve surprise. But with the command disruption, surprise is unlikely. The enemy knows the general is gone. They know the replacement is inexperienced. They know the morale is low. They are waiting for the attempt. They want the trap force to try to run so they can engage them in the open. This creates a terrible dilemma for the new commander. If he orders a breakout, he risks losing everyone in the open. If he orders them to hold, he risks them starving or running out of ammo in place. There is no good option. This is the definition of a lost cause. The only variable now is the cost. How many lives will be spent before the pocket collapses? How much equipment will be lost? How much political capital will be burned? The institution has decided that these are acceptable costs to pay for protecting the narrative. They have decided that the story of the war is more important than the soldiers in the story. We must also look at the historical context. Encirclement tests of this size are rare in modern warfare. They belong to a different era of conflict. They remind us of the great battles of the past where armies were swallowed whole. The reason they are rare now is because mobility and air power usually prevent them. The fact that one has succeeded here tells us something about the balance of power. It tells us that the defending forces lost air superiority. It tells us that their mobility is restricted. It tells us that their intelligence picture is compromised. These are systemic failures. They are not just bad luck. They are the result of long minus-term trends that have finally culminated in this moment. The trap is the symptom. The disease is the degradation of the military machine over time. The disappearance of the general is the fever breaking. It is the sign that the body is failing. The international observers are watching this closely. They are analyzing the data. They are seeing the shift in command. They are seeing the lack of relief efforts. They are drawing conclusions about the endurance of the force. This affects the flow of aid. It affects diplomatic negotiations. If one side looks like it is collapsing, the other side feels less pressure to compromise. The encirclement strengthens the hand of the attacker in any future talks. It gives them leverage. It gives them a bargaining chip. The 130. Tsarist soldiers are not just combatants anymore. They are political assets. Their fate will be discussed in capitals far away from the front line. Their suffering will be used to justify further escalation or to demand concessions. This is the grim reality of modern war. The human element is often secondary to the strategic value. What happens next is uncertain. The pocket could hold for weeks. It could collapse in days. It depends on the will of the soldiers. It depends on the decisions of the new commander. It depends on whether the high command changes its mind and sends reserves. But based on the current evidence, a rescue is unlikely. The positioning of forces suggests containment. The silence suggests acceptance. The removal of the general suggests closure. The story of this operation is ending. The question is how it ends. Will it end in surrender? Will it end in a last stand? Will it end in a chaotic rout? Each outcome has different implications. A surrender provides prisoners and intelligence. A last stand provides martyrs and propaganda. A rout provides equipment and terrain. The enemy is prepared for all of them. They have planned for the aftermath. They are ready to exploit whatever happens. For the soldiers inside, the focus is on survival. They are not thinking about strategy. They are thinking about the next meal. They are thinking about the next shift. They are thinking about their families. They are living in the moment because the future is too dark to look at. They rely on each other. The small unit cohesion becomes the only thing that matters. The big picture command structure is irrelevant to the man in the whole. He trusts the man next to him. He trusts his immediate sergeant. He does not trust the general who disappeared. He does not trust the bureaucrat who replaced him. This fragmentation of trust is the final stage of the collapse. When the army becomes a collection of small groups fighting for themselves, the organized force ceases to exist. It becomes a mob. It becomes a crowd. It loses the power to project strength. The legacy of this event will last for years. It will be studied in military academies. It will be cited as an example of how not to command. It will be cited as an example of how effective planning can overcome numerical superiority. It will change the doctrine of both sides. The victors will learn that patience and precision work. The losers will learn that bureaucracy and blame do not. But for the 130,